Primaris Space Marines are humanity's finest warriors. Genetically enhanced to be stronger, faster and more resilient even than other Space Marines, these guys are immensely powerful warriors and the miniatures of them are fantastic as well. Now in this video we're going to show you how to paint a Primaris captain in the colours of the Ultramarines, and by following the techniques and methods we're going to show you, you'll be able to paint any Ultramarine that you want to paint from the Dark Imperium box set. So without further ado, let's get started. No matter what Primaris Space Marine you're painting in the colours of the Ultramarines, the very first thing that you should do is undercoat them. And the obvious choice of colour for your undercoat here is Macragge Blue Spray, which you can see is exactly what I've done with our captain here, ready to start painting, because doing this means that we've actually coloured most of the armour straight away in one go, and we're now ready to add some shade to it to give it some depth. Now the shade we're going to use is Null Oil, and as always make sure to give all your paints a good shake before you use each colour. And I'm going to do what's called a recess shade here, so we want lots of control over the paint. So the ideal brush for it is a small layer brush. And what you should do is just get some of the paint onto your brush and then put it onto a palette like this, because having the palette allows you to control exactly how much of this paint you're applying at once. You don't want loads, really what you want is a fine tip on the brush, so just use the palette to get to that point. And when you're ready, what you do is paint this directly into all the recess detail on the armour, such as just on top of this eagle just here. I'm going to paint it to that recess there to give the armour a bit more depth. So what you need to do now is go around all the blue doing this. If you do make any mistakes, let the shade dry, then just neaten up with Macragge Blue once more before you continue. I've finished applying that shade now, and you can see the details much more defined, and with that done we're now ready to start highlighting the miniature. Now the first colour for this is going to be Calgar Blue, and for this we're going to use a technique called edge highlighting. To do it what you need is a small layer brush, and again you want to use your palette here to get the paint ready. What you want to do this time is add a little bit of water to it. You don't need loads, just enough to make sure that the paint flows really smoothly from your brush. You want it to be about this sort of consistency really before you start applying it, and also make sure you don't have too much on your brush. You want a good fine tip on there. And when you're ready, what you do is look for any sharper edges on the armour and pick them out with this colour. So for example, this collar, what I can do is hold my brush at 45 degrees and just run it along there like that. You can see I get a nice, neat, straight line really sharply there like that. Now sometimes you won't really be able to use that particular technique of angling your brush like that because the detail is quite tricky to get to. For example, on the helmet, and what you need to do here is just keep your hands as steady as possible, and again just follow along those edges. With that edge highlight applied, the power armour is looking great, and in fact for the bulk of your army going to this point is perfect. But for your heroes, you might want to go a little bit further and make them stand out more, and if you do, what you need is Fenrisian Grey. Now I'm going to do another edge highlight, but this time a little bit more precisely. So I'm still going to use my small layer brush to apply this, and what you want to do is again use your palette, thin your paint down so it flows really easily, and again you want that really fine tip on your brush as well. You're looking for about that kind of consistency really. And when you're ready this time, what you want to do is pick out in the sharpest corners of the detail. So a great example of that is on the collar that we've got here. You can see it's got this little indent in it. What I'm going to do is add an extra highlight just focused around that part there to make this detail stand out a little bit more. Just like that, only a small amount, being very light with it, and also the little rivets that we've got around here too. It just makes that detail stand out a bit more. And with that fine highlight applied, you can see the power armour for the blue areas is now complete, and we're ready to start the next colour. Now, the next colour is going to be white parts. Some of the Ultramarines do have white details on them, such as the helmet for example, but we're going to focus on painting a white knee pad, though you can use what I do here to paint any detail that you want to paint white. Now the first colour we need is Ulthurn Grey, and then we're going to apply some Null Oil into the recesses and then finish off with a highlight of White Scar. But starting with Ulthurn Grey, I'm going to be applying this using a medium layer brush because with this detail I want a lot of control here. So as always, use your palette to get your paint thinned down and ready. You want it nice and smooth, about that sort of consistency, and when you're ready what you want to do is just start blocking this into the area that you want to be white. So I'm going to go for this knee pad here. When I apply it you'll see it's still a little bit transparent, but that's not a problem. What I'm going to do is just apply this first coat, let it dry, then apply a second coat in exactly the same way, and that way you get a nice even finish and a solid colour as well. Once you've established that even colour, you're now ready to shade the recesses using Null Oil and a small layer brush. And again, this is a recess shade, being as neat as you can. If you do need to neaten up afterwards, then do so with Ulthurn Grey before you continue. And once you finish that, you're ready to highlight the white using White Scar, following along all the sharpest edges. And there we are, the white is complete, and we're ready to start the next detail, which is going to be all the silver parts. Now there's quite a lot of these scattered across the model. You're looking at things like the sword blade, some chain, some cables, all that kind of thing, and all these are started out with a base coat of lead belcher. Then we'll shade over them with Null Oil, and then we're going to reapply some lead belcher just to the blade of the sword to make it shiny once more, and then we'll add a highlight of Stormhost Silver. But starting out with lead belcher, I'm going to be applying this mostly with a medium layer brush, but at this point it's a good idea to have a small layer brush on hand as well because you will need it for some of the smaller, more intricate detail. Now as always, be sure to thin your paint down, so you want it to be a little bit thinner than that, I think, about this sort of consistency before you start to apply it. When you're ready, all you've got to do is start blocking in these details. So I'm going to concentrate on the power sword for this example, and I'm going to be starting to apply this like this by applying 2 thin coats as well. Once you finish base coating all that silver, you're now ready to shade it using Nuln Oil. Now rather than painting into the recesses this time, paint it over the entire area, letting it settle in the detail as you go. Once you've finished applying it, give it plenty of time to dry. Once the Nuln Oil is completely dry, we're ready to go back to lead belcher for the sword blade. And what you want to do here is to layer over most of it, but avoiding the recessed areas where the shade has settled. So really what you're looking at are little nodules down here and the base of the blade as well. And doing this will make it nice and shiny, ready for highlighting. Now that layer has been applied, you can see the sword blade is nice and shiny again, and we're ready to move on to Stormhost Silver to use for an edge highlight on all the silver details. And there we are, all that silver detail is now complete, and we can move on to the next part, which is going to be all the gold decoration. Now there's quite a lot of this, and it varies from miniature to miniature, but all of it's painted in the same way, starting out with a base coat of Retributor Armour. Now I'm going to be applying this again mostly with a medium layer brush, but I still have that small layer brush on hand because you will need it for the more intricate parts. And again, make sure you use your palette here to get the paint under control. So thin it with a little bit of water, and use your palette just to make sure that you don't have too much paint on your brush. You don't want to be applying too much at once because then you'll lose control of it, you see. So there we go, about right there. And all we've got to do now is start picking out the gold details. And I'm going to begin with this design we've got on the chest plate here, being really careful around this detail, which is quite intricate, and being very careful, especially when I get close to that blue. And with this colour, you will need to apply 2 thin coats. Once you've finished applying that base coat, you're ready to add some shade to the gold to give it some depth. And what we're going to do here is apply some Reikland Flesh shade to it, which is fantastic on gold because it gives it a nice warmth. Now I'm going to be applying this mostly with a medium layer brush, but again have that small layer brush on hand because you will need it. And what you need to do is use your palette here to gauge exactly how much you have in your brush at once, because you don't want to put on so much at once that you lose control of it. So once you're ready, all you've got to do is start painting this directly over all the gold that you've done so far, and just be really careful whenever you get close to the blue armour so that you don't get any of this shade onto those blue parts. Once that shade is dried completely, you're ready to add a highlight to all the gold, and for this what you need is Liberator Gold, and we're going to edge highlight it onto these details. So we're back to the small layer brush for this, and again use your palette to get that good tip on your brush. So thin your paint down with a little bit of water, and when you're ready what you're looking to do is to pick out all those edges on the details that we've done in gold so far. So if I start on these wings up here once again, what I'm going to do is just angle my brush just to catch those raised corners on the ends there like that. And there we are, all the gold detail is now complete and we're ready for the next part. And this is going to be all the black detail. So you're looking at things like the Balkan casing and also the joints in the armour. Now for this, all we need is a Baden Black for our base coat, and then we're going to highlight these details with Eschen Grey. But starting out with our base coat of a Baden Black, I'm going to begin with my medium layer brush, and what you want to do now is be really careful because we're working amongst a lot of detail that we've completed so far. So be sure to use your palette here, and once your paint is ready, what you want to do is just start base coating these details in. I'm going to start on the Balkan casing just up here, and you can see I'm being really careful as I work around all that silver. And then use Eschen Grey to apply an edge highlight to all of the black. With the black done, we're now ready to paint in some of the remaining details of our miniature, and conveniently they all use the same colour palette so we can do them at the same time. We're going to start out with Zandri Dust, which is used for the inside of the cloak, the parchment and also any bones and relics in the miniature, and then we're going to move on to painting Screamer Pink on the back of the cloak, but also the Purity Seal wax and the grip of the power sword. But starting with Zandri Dust, I'm going to apply this mostly with a medium layer brush, but you'll need a small layer brush on hand as well, which you'll see why in just a moment. Be sure to thin your paint down so it's really smooth, especially on that cloak, to get it as smooth as possible. And when you're ready, you just need to start base coating this on. Now you can see why you'll need a smaller brush on the cloak, because whilst we're painting this, we've also got to paint behind the Space Marine. Getting some of these details is quite tricky, so take your time, use a smaller brush, and if you do make any mistakes, neaten up the armour before you continue. And with this colour, you will need to apply 2 thin coats as well. With that done, we're now ready for Screamer Pink, and this is for the back of the cloak, but also the Purity Seal wax and the grip of the sword. Now that we've finished base coating with Screamer Pink, we're ready to shade all of these details, and for this we need 2 shades. First of all, we're going to use Nuln Oil for the back of the cloak to really emphasise all the creases in it, and then for everything else we're going to use Agrax's shade. But starting out with Northern Oil, I'm going to apply this with a medium layer brush, and what you want to do here is just keep an eye on this, how it settles, because as you'll see, it will tend to collect a lot towards the bottom of the cloak. So make sure you've got plenty on your palette and you loaded up your brush, and when you're ready, all you do is paint this all over the cloak, and you're looking for it to settle in these recessed creases, such as just down there. But like I say, keep an eye on it as it dries, because it will tend to collect towards the bottom there, and you can see it's doing it just there. All you do is use your brush to move away the excess paint and keep it even. And once the Northern Oil is completely dry, you're now ready to apply Agrax Earthshade onto all these new details that we've been painting in. Remember, as you apply this, don't put on too much at once so that you don't lose control of it and get it onto details that you've completed so far. Now that shade's completely dry, we're ready to begin highlighting all these details. I'm going to start out with all the cream coloured parts, so the inside of the cloak, the parchment and so on. Now for this, first of all, we're going to go back to Zandri Dust for the inside of the cloak, and the reason for this is because it's such a large area, we want to achieve a smooth highlight on it, and going back to that base colour is the first step in doing that. But then after that, we're going to move on to layering with a Shabty Bone, and then we'll do a highlight with Screaming Skull, and those will be on all the cream details. But starting with Zandri Dust, I'm going to be applying this with a medium layer brush, and what you want to do here is once again use your palette to get your paint nice and smooth and ready, and a little bit thinner than you normally would at this stage. You're looking for it to be a little bit thinner than that, I think, kind of like that. And when you're ready, what you want to do is start applying this to the inside of the cloak, but avoiding the areas where the shade has settled the most. So you can see the creases quite deep in the cloak there. You want to avoid those parts and paint these flatter, smoother areas towards the front here like this. Now some recesses to look out for as well are these ones just down here around the little designs here. You just want to leave some of that darker colour still showing in the recess around them as you paint the flatter areas around them there like that. Once you've done that, you're now ready to start layering using a Shabty Bone, and this is for all the cream details, so not just the cloak. And with this colour you will need to apply 2 thin coats, again following the same sequence of avoiding the recessed detail. And finally, highlight all the cream details with Screaming Skull. On the cloak, you want to do the outside of it, just along the edges like this, and also the tops of any sharper creases. As for things like the purity seals, once again, just pick out all the most defined features on them. So really what you're looking at is painting lines across them like this. And there we are, that's all the cream details complete, and now we can move on to all the burgundy details, starting with the outside of the cloak, which is going to reapply some Screamer Pink on it. This is for exactly the same reason that we reapplied Zandri Dust to the inside of the cloak. It's such a large detail, that's a good idea to go back to that mineral base colour, just to get a nice smooth highlight to start to build up. And also we're going to show you an extra cool thing you can do with Screamer Pink as well. But after that, we're going to start highlighting with Pink Horror, and then we'll do a very fine highlight of Slanesh Grey. But starting with Screamer Pink, I'm going to begin with my medium layer brush for this, and the technique is just like we did earlier really with Zandri Dust. What you want to do is use your palette to thin your paint down a little bit more than normal, so you want about that sort of consistency, perhaps a little bit more. There we go. And when you're ready, what you want to do is start painting this onto the outside of the cloak, but avoiding the recessed detail where the shade settled. And you can see that really clearly here with how the black settled in the middle there. What you want to do is just paint either side of it like this with 1 thin coat, avoiding that recess there like that. You can see I'm getting a nice smooth highlight starting to build up. Now the extra cool thing you can do is to paint a line of this colour on the inside of the cloak. It's entirely optional, you don't have to do it because it is quite tricky. It basically just requires a steady hand. But if you do want to do it, what you need is a small layer brush, and you want to thin your paint even more than what we just did previously. So you want it about that sort of consistency, and then make sure you've got a fine tip on your brush. And what you want to do is hold the model as steady as you can, and you're looking at these corner pieces here, these gold parts. What you want to do is follow the line of that gold straight up. So as steady as you can, just start painting in a line on like this, and you just carry this on all the way around. Once you've finished applying that layer of Screaming Skull, you're now ready to highlight using Pink Horror. Now for the cloak, you want to go all the way around the edge of it, but also you want to pick out all the creases as well at the very tops of each one. So lines running along areas such as this. And also be sure to highlight all the purity seals at this point as well, and the sword grip too. And with that done, all you need to do is finish off the back of the cloak with a very fine highlight of Slanesh Grey. Now that we've finished highlighting all those burgundy details, our miniature is very nearly completed. We've only got a few small things left to do. The first of those things we need to paint are the eyes, and for this we just need white scar, and then we're going to glaze over them using bloodletter. Then after that, if you want to, you can add some text to all the parchment, and for this you need Rhinox hide. But we're going to be starting with white scar, for which I'm going to be using a small layer brush, because painting the eyes now, of course, these are very small and detailed, so we need to have a lot of control here. So be sure to thin your paint down a little bit more than you normally would, but the trick is to make sure you don't have too much of it on your brush at once, because you don't want to lose control of it. So use your palette to help you do that, and get that fine tip on your brush, and when you're ready, what you're looking to do is to paint a line in the centre of the eye lens. So hold your hands as steady as possible, and what you want to do is just paint a line in the very middle, just like this. Once you've done that, you're ready to run bloodletter into the entire recess of the eye. And just be careful not to put on too much at once here so that it doesn't run out of that recess. And now that the eyes are complete, all we have to do is write some text on the parchment, and for this you just need Rhinox hide, and all you do is just paint some little squiggly lines just running across the paper. Now once you've done this, all you've got to do is apply the transfers if you want to, and then base your miniature. And as always, I recommend you base it in the same way as the rest of your army. And with the transfers applied and the base fully textured, this Primaris Ultramarine captain is ready to take to the field and lead his brothers to victory against the treacherous Death Guard. So when you're painting Space Marines, there's a couple of things that are important to remember, but the most important thing is it's actually easiest to paint them by doing all their power armour first. So in this case, start out with all your blue power armour. Now the toughest bit of painting this particular miniature is actually painting the inside of the cloak, just because it's tricky to get to. So when you're doing it, just remember to take your time and, well, be as neat as you can. And remember, you don't actually have to paint all of the inside of it, just the parts that you can see easily from the front. Once you've finished doing the inside of it, just neat any mistakes you may have made on the power armour. And finally, when you're highlighting the cloak, remember to apply your paint as two thin coats to ensure you get nice smooth highlights, and that way you'll get a really nice final result. Now remember, everything we've shown in this video can be applied to any of the Ultramarines you get inside the Dark Imperium box set, so you can paint the entire army by just following parts of this guide. So we really hope you guys have enjoyed it and learned something from it, and we'll see you all again very soon.